Today, we are going to explore a subject that sits at the intersection of physiology, psychology, and practical human performance: how to exercise for strength gains and hormone optimization. The science of strength training is not only about lifting weights or moving resistance. It is about understanding how our bodies adapt, how our neurochemistry shifts, and how our hormones respond to stress and recovery. When we engage with this process correctly, we can build a system that supports not just physical strength, but resilience, clarity of thought, and long-term vitality. This is not about hype or dramatic transformations. It is about applying protocols that are grounded in research, systems that we know drive specific outcomes, and practices that you can implement consistently. My goal in this conversation is to provide you with both the science, the evidence-based foundation, and the practical tools that will allow you to act on that science. We will cover 10 key dimensions of strength training and hormone regulation. For each, I will break down what research indicates, how the body responds at the level of the nervous system and endocrine system, and then provide clear, actionable strategies. As always, I will keep the delivery measured, calm, and respectful of your time and attention. Progressive overload. As the central driver of strength, at the core of strength development lies the principle of progressive overload. Progressive overload is the systematic, gradual increase of stress placed upon the body during training. The human body adapts to stress. This is a foundational concept in exercise physiology. Without progressive overload, the body has no reason to adapt further. Now, when we say stress in this context, we are referring not only to mechanical stress, the literal weight or resistance, but also to the biochemical stress that occurs within muscle fibers, the neural stress that challenges motor unit recruitment, and the hormonal cascades that follow. Strength is built when the body is asked to perform slightly beyond its current capacity, and then given the appropriate environment to recover and adapt. Research indicates that progressive overload can be applied in multiple ways: by increasing weight, by increasing repetitions, by adjusting the speed or tempo of movement, or by reducing rest intervals. Each of these variables changes the way the nervous system and musculature are challenged. From a neurochemical perspective, progressive overload increases the demand for motor neuron firing, which strengthens the connection between the central nervous system and muscle fibers. This improves what is often referred to as neural efficiency. On the hormonal side, progressive overload elevates anabolic hormones such as testosterone and growth hormone, particularly when large muscle groups are engaged. The body interprets the increased demand as a signal to upregulate the systems that repair tissue and build a new muscle. Practically, this means that if you are lifting the same weight for the same number of repetitions in the same way, week after week, you are not sending a strong enough signal to your body. You must create a small but meaningful increase. The science suggests that increments as little as 5% in weight or repetitions are sufficient to trigger adaptation. What matters most is the consistent application of this principle over time. There is also a psychological component here. Progressive overload, when applied gradually, creates confidence. You are not overwhelming the body or mind with unrealistic demands. Instead, you are signaling growth in a controlled, sustainable manner. This reduces the risk of injury, improves adherence, and aligns with the neurochemistry of dopamine. Small wins create reinforcement, which encourages long-term behavior. For implementation, consider this protocol. Choose a foundational movement such as a squat, deadlift, press, or pull. Begin with a weight you can perform for 6-8 repetitions with good form. Each week, increase either the weight by 2-5 pounds or the repetitions by 1. Track this progression, and over the course of months, you will see significant strength gains. Importantly, allow for periodic deload weeks, lighter training periods that permit the body to consolidate adaptations and prevent burnout. In summary, progressive overload is the first pillar because it engages the nervous system, the muscular system, and the endocrine system in a coordinated way. It is simple in concept but profound in impact. Without it, no other optimization strategies can truly take root. With it, you lay the foundation for both strength gains and hormonal balance. The role of compound movements in maximizing hormonal and neural adaptations when it comes to training for strength and hormone optimization. Not all exercises carry equal. Research consistently shows that compound movements, exercises that recruit multiple joints and multiple muscle groups simultaneously, generate superior adaptations compared to isolation exercises when the goal is overall strength and hormonal regulation. Compound movements include squats, deadlifts, presses, rows, and pull-ups. What sets these apart from isolation exercises, such as bicep curls or leg extensions, is the degree of systemic demand they place on the body. When you perform a squat, for example, you are not simply engaging the quadriceps. You are activating the glutes, hamstrings, spinal erectors, abdominals, and even the muscles of the upper back and shoulders for stabilization. This full body recruitment requires an orchestrated effort from the nervous system and leads to significant hormonal signaling. From a neurophysiological perspective, compound movements enhance motor unit recruitment. Motor units are the functional connection between the nervous system and muscle fibers. When you train using compound lifts, you are demanding the simultaneous activation of high-threshold motor units. Those capable of generating repeated activation of these units strengthens the neural pathways that connect the brain and spinal cord to muscle tissue, creating efficiency and coordination. This is why individuals who practice compound lifts often see rapid improvements in performance, even before major muscle growth occurs. The nervous system becomes more efficient at firing. On the hormonal side, compound movements create what we can think of as a hormonal surge. Multiple studies demonstrate that performing large multi-joint lifts with sufficient intensity elevates testosterone, growth hormone, and even catecholamines, such as adrenaline and noradrenaline. These hormones play key roles in tissue repair, muscle hypertrophy, fat metabolism, and cognitive alertness. For example, a heavy set of deadlifts not only stresses muscle fibers, but also signals the endocrine system that the body has engaged in a survival-level effort. The adaptive response includes upregulation of anabolic hormones to repair and fortify the system. To make this concrete, consider a protocol comparison. If an individual spends 45 minutes performing isolated arm exercises, the local muscles will be stressed, but the systemic response will be minimal. In contrast, spending the same time on squats, presses, and pull-ups engages a much larger percentage of total muscle mass, sends a stronger stress signal to the nervous system, and produces a more significant endocrine response. This is why athletes and coaches often refer to compound movements as the big rocks of training. Once they are in place, smaller details can be added around them. The science also points to metabolic demand as an important factor. Compound lifts elevate energy expenditure more than isolation exercises, not only during training, but also in the hours following. This post-exercise increase in energy use is associated with enhanced fat oxidation and improved insulin sensitivity, both of which support hormone balance. For men, this often translates to maintaining higher levels of free testosterone. For women, it contributes to balanced estrogen and progesterone signaling, along with improved growth hormone release. Practically, the implication is clear. The foundation of any strength and hormone-focused program should be built on compound lifts. A useful framework is to anchor training around 4 key movement patterns: squat patterns such as back squat, front squat, or goblet squat; hinge patterns such as deadlift, Romanian deadlift, or hip thrust; push pattern such as bench press, overhead press, or push-up variations; pull patterns such as pull-up, bent over row, or lat pull-down. By covering these 4 categories, you ensure that the majority of your musculature is engaged across the week, and you maximize the systemic hormonal response. One common concern, especially for individuals new to training, is whether compound lifts are inherently more dangerous. The reality is that risk is strongly linked to form and load management, not the exercises themselves. When executed with proper technique and gradual progression, compound lifts are no more dangerous than isolation movements. In fact, because they build stabilizing strength across joints, they often reduce long-term injury risk. Compound lifts have a unique ability to cultivate focus and resilience. Performing a heavy squat requires deliberate attention to breath, posture, and controlled movement. This aligns the mind and body in a way that is neurologically beneficial. Research in sports psychology suggests that this type of integrated effort builds self-regulatory capacity, the ability to control arousal, maintain composure, and direct focus under stress. This capacity translates well beyond the gym, improving how individuals handle stress in daily life. There is also a social and evolutionary perspective worth mentioning. Historically, human strength was expressed through multi-joint efforts, carrying, climbing, pushing, pulling, lifting objects in the environment. Isolation-type tasks are artificial constructs of modern fitness. Compound movements reflect the way the human musculoskeletal system evolved to operate, and engaging them may resonate more deeply with our biological design. This could explain why they produce such profound endocrine responses. They align with the body's natural mode of exertion. For implementation, here is a simple compound focus protocol. Train 3 times per week. Each session, select one movement from each category: squat, hinge, push, pull. Perform 3-5 sets of 4-8 repetitions per exercise, with rest intervals of 2-3 minutes for heavy lifts. Focus on gradual progression, adding small increments in load or repetitions over time. This structure ensures you are stimulating the nervous system, musculature, and endocrine system in a balanced manner. Around this foundation, you can add accessory isolation work if desired, but these should remain secondary. To summarize, compound movements are the second pillar because they maximize neural recruitment, drive robust hormonal responses, increase metabolic demand, and develop real-world strength. They align with the way the human body is designed to move, and they provide a time-efficient, highly effective method for building strength and optimizing hormone. The science of rest and recovery between sets and sessions. When discussing strength gains and hormone optimization, most people understandably focus on the training itself, the exercises, the weight lifted, the sets and repetitions performed. Yet the periods of rest, both between sets within a workout and between training sessions across days, are equally critical. Without adequate recovery, the nervous system cannot fully reset, muscle fibers cannot properly repair, and the hormonal environment cannot shift into the anabolic or building state required for long-term adaptation. Let's begin with the micro level. Rest between sets. Research indicates that the duration of rest directly shapes the physiological adaptations that follow. Short rest intervals such as 30-60 seconds tend to emphasize metabolic stress. They elevate lactate, hydrogen ions, and other metabolites in the muscle, which can stimulate hypertrophy through pathways involving growth hormone release and cellular swelling. However, very short rests often limit the ability to lift heavy loads, which are essential for maximal strength development. In contrast, longer rest intervals, approximately 2-5 minutes, allow for replenishment of phosphocreatine stores, reduction of metabolic byproducts, and recovery of the nervous system. This enables the performance of higher quality, higher force repetitions across subsequent sets. For pure strength development, these longer rests are more effective. A landmark study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research showed that athletes who rested 3 minutes between sets gained more strength over 8 weeks than those who rested only 1 minute, even though total training time was longer. So, how does this connect to hormone? Longer rest periods are associated with more robust testosterone responses, particularly when compound lifts are performed with high load. Shorter rests, while elevating growth hormone more acutely, can blunt performance on heavy lifts, reducing the mechanical tension stimulus that is a primary driver of adaptation. Thus, the balance of rest intervals should be tailored to the desired outcome. If the focus is maximal strength and hormone optimization, 2 to 3 minutes of rest between heavy sets is ideal. Now, let's zoom out to the macro level. Rest between training sessions. Strength training, by its very nature, creates microtrauma in muscle fibers and imposes significant stress on the nervous system. The repair and adaptation processes that follow are what lead to actual strength gains. This process unfolds over 24 to 72 hours, depending on the intensity and volume of the session. During this recovery window, anabolic hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factor 1, rise to support protein synthesis and tissue repair. Cortisol, the stress hormone, should decline provided recovery conditions are adequate. Sleep is the most powerful lever here. Deep, slow-wave sleep is when growth hormone secretion peaks, and REM sleep is when the brain consolidates motor learning from training. Skimping on sleep not only impairs recovery, but also disrupts hormonal balance, lowering testosterone and elevating cortisol. This is why athletes and coaches often say that you do not grow during training. You grow during recovery. Training is the stimulus. Recovery is the adaptation. From a practical standpoint, this means scheduling rest days is not a sign of weakness or laziness, but an evidence-based protocol for optimizing outcomes. The nervous system component deserves particular attention. Heavy lifting relies on the central nervous system to recruit high-threshold motor units and generate maximal force. After intense sessions, the CNS can experience what is sometimes referred to as neural fatigue. This is not just muscular tiredness. It is a temporary reduction in the ability of neurons to fire at their highest capacity. Adequate rest between sessions allows the CNS to restore excitability, ensuring you can perform at full capacity in subsequent workouts. Hormonal optimization also hinges on managing cumulative fatigue. Chronic insufficient recovery elevates cortisol chronically, suppresses testosterone, and blunts growth hormone release. This creates a catabolic environment, one where the body breaks down tissue rather than building it. Over time, this state not only stalls progress, but can impair mood, motivation, and immune function. Many cases of so-called plateaus in training are not due to lack of effort in the gym, but lack of adequate recovery outside it. What practical tools can we apply here? Let's break them down into protocols. Protocol 1, rest between sets for maximal strength. Rest 2-5 minutes between heavy compound sets. For hypertrophy with a strength component, rest 90-120 seconds. For metabolic conditioning, rest 30-60 seconds, but use this sparingly if strength and hormones are the primary goals. Protocol 2, rest between sessions, avoid training the same muscle group with heavy loads on consecutive days. For most individuals, training 3-4 times per week, with rest days or light activity days in between, provides the best balance. Light activity, such as walking, mobility work, or very light cardio, can be used on recovery days to enhance circulation and speed recovery without interfering with adaptation. Protocol 3. Sleep as recovery. Aim for 7-9 hours of sleep per night, with consistent sleep and wake time. Support deep sleep by minimizing blue light exposure before bed, keeping the room cool, and avoiding stimulants late in the day. Consider relaxation protocols such as non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, or yoga nidra to enhance recovery during periods of high training stress. There is also an often overlooked tool, deliberate breath work. Slow diaphragmatic breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which accelerates recovery by lowering heart rate and cortisol levels. Something as simple as 5 minutes of slow breathing after training can shift the body from a high adrenaline state into a recovery mode. Another important factor is nutrition, though we will cover this more fully in later points. For now, it is enough to recognize that consuming sufficient protein and calories post-training provides the raw materials for repair. Without adequate fuel, even the best rest protocols cannot fully optimize recovery. Psychologically, embracing rest requires reframing. In many cultures, especially in the United States, productivity is equated with constant action. Rest days may feel unproductive, but from the lens of physiology and neuroendocrinology, rest is an active component of training. It is during recovery that the brain rewires motor patterns that the muscles repair and that hormones recalibrate. Without rest, training is incomplete. To summarize, rest and recovery are not optional. They are fundamental. Between sets, rest dictates whether you emphasize strength or metabolic stress. Between sessions, rest determines whether adaptations consolidate or whether stress accumulates to a detrimental level. Hormones, neural efficiency, and muscular strength are all optimized when recovery is respected. Rest, therefore, is the third pillar of training for strength gains and hormone optimization. The importance of training intensity and load for hormonal optimization. When we talk about training for strength and hormone optimization, intensity is often misunderstood. Many people equate intensity with effort, sweating profusely, feeling exhausted, or pushing until failure on every set. But in exercise physiology, intensity has a precise definition. It refers to the percentage of your one repetition maximum, 1 RM, that you are lifting. Training intensity, measured this way, has profound effects on strength gains, nervous system adaptation, and hormonal responses. Research indicates that different intensity zones produce distinct outcomes. Training at very low intensities, below 50% of one's 1 RM, tends to be insufficient for stimulating strength gains in trained individuals. This range can still be useful for recovery, warm-ups, or endurance-based goals, but it does not generate the level of mechanical tension required to optimize strength or hormonal responses. The sweet spot for strength and hormone optimization generally lies in the range of 65–85% of 1 RM. At this intensity, the body is challenged enough to recruit high-threshold motor units, which are critical for maximal strength development, while still allowing for multiple high-quality repetitions. Lifting at or above 85% of 1 RM, typically corresponding to sets of 1–5 repetitions, is where maximal neural recruitment occurs. These loads send the strongest signal to the nervous system to improve firing rates, and to the endocrine system to elevate anabolic hormone. One fascinating aspect of intensity is the dose-response curve for hormones. Studies consistently show that heavy resistance training with large muscle groups elevates testosterone and growth hormone more significantly than lighter training. The magnitude of this hormonal response correlates with the total load lifted, the number of muscle groups involved, and the rest periods used. For example, a heavy set of 5 squats at 85% of 1 RM is far more hormonally stimulating than a set of 20 light curls, even if both feel subjectively challenging. Why does this happen? From an evolutionary perspective, the body perceives lifting heavy objects as a survival-related task. Engaging many muscle groups at high intensity signals that the organism is encountering significant physical demands. The adaptive response is to strengthen tissue, enhance neural efficiency, and elevate hormones that support resilience. In contrast, low-intensity work with small muscles does not trigger the same systemic survival response, and therefore the endocrine changes are minimal. Now, there is also a practical question. Should one always train at very high intensities? The answer is no. While high-intensity training is necessary to stimulate strength and hormone optimization, it cannot be sustained indefinitely without risk of overtraining or injury. The nervous system and connective tissues, such as tendons and ligaments, require time to adapt. This is where periodization, the systematic cycling of intensity, becomes essential. Periodization involves organizing training into phases where intensity is varied. For example, one might spend 3 weeks training at 70–75% of 1 RM, followed by a week at 80–85%, and then deload with a week at 60%. This cycling allows for continual progress while reducing cumulative fatigue. Research supports this approach, showing that periodized programs produce greater long-term strength gains and more consistent hormonal responses than non-periodized random training. Another consideration is proximity to failure. Some argue that every set should be taken to muscular failure to maximize results. However, evidence suggests that for strength gains and hormonal balance, training close to failure within 1 to 3 repetitions is sufficient. Going to absolute failure increases fatigue disproportionately to the benefits gained, often elevating cortisol more than testosterone, which tilts the hormonal balance away from optimization. A more effective approach is to lift heavy loads with excellent form, stop just shy of failure, and allow the nervous system to recover adequately for subsequent sets. The psychological dimension of intensity is also important. Training with heavy loads requires focus, composure, and a calm engagement with effort, unlike high-repetition endurance training, which often becomes a battle against fatigue. Strength training at high intensity is about precision. Every repetition matters. This mindful engagement strengthens not only the body, but also mental resilience, reinforcing the brain's capacity to direct effort under pressure. Practically, how should intensity be applied? Here are protocols based on research and practice. Protocol 1. Intensity zones for strength and hormones train, primarily in the 65–85% of 1 RM range. Use sets of 3–8 repetitions for compound lifts performed with 2 5-minute rest between sets. Periodically test your 1 RM or estimate it through submaximal lifts to ensure your intensity zones remain accurate. Protocol 2. Periodization cycle training. Intensity over 3–6-week blocks. Example: weeks 1–3 at 70–75%. Week 4 at 80–85%, week 5 deload at 60%, then repeat with slight increases. This prevents overtraining while still providing regular high-intensity exposure. Protocol 3. Proximity to failure train to within 1 to 3 repetitions of failure, but avoid grinding to absolute failure on every set. Reserve true failure training for accessory or isolation lifts, where systemic fatigue is less impactful. There is also an interaction between intensity and age. Younger individuals often tolerate higher intensities more frequently, while older lifters may benefit from slightly lower intensities with greater attention to recovery. However, research shows that even older adults can significantly elevate testosterone and growth hormone through appropriately programmed high-intensity training, making it a powerful tool for maintaining vitality across the lifespan. Nutrition and supplementation also modulate intensity's impact. For instance, adequate carbohydrate intake supports glycogen replenishment, which fuels high-intensity performance, while creatine supplementation has been shown to enhance performance in the 80–90% 1 RM range by supporting phosphocreatine resynthesis. These factors ensure that the body has the resources to perform and recover at high intensities. To summarize, intensity, defined as the load relative to your maximum, is the 4th pillar because it directly drives neural adaptation, muscular recruitment, and hormonal responses. The body adapts specifically to the demands placed upon it, and only high enough intensities send the signal to grow stronger and optimize hormone function. The key is to use intensity intelligently, heavy enough to stimulate adaptation, but organized in cycles to prevent excessive fatigue. Done this way, training intensity becomes a precise tool for long-term strength and hormone optimization. The critical role of nutrition in strength and hormone optimization: if we think of strength training as the signal, then nutrition is the raw material that allows the body to respond to that signal. Without the proper nutrients, the nervous system, the musculature, and the endocrine system cannot fully adapt to training. In other words, you can train with perfect intensity, the best exercises, and optimal recovery protocols. But if nutrition is neglected, strength gains and hormone optimization will plateau. Let's begin by looking at macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Since each plays a distinct role in both strength development and hormonal balance, protein is often emphasized, and for good reason. Proteins provide amino acids, which are the building blocks for muscle repair and growth. The amino acid leucine in particular is a powerful trigger of the mTOR pathway, which stimulates muscle protein synthesis. Research consistently shows that consuming sufficient protein enhances recovery, supports strength gains, and helps maintain lean mass. From a hormonal perspective, protein intake influences insulin and glucagon, both of which regulate nutrient availability. Adequate protein also supports satiety, which indirectly helps with body composition, a critical factor in maintaining healthy testosterone and estrogen levels. For practical purposes, most research suggests that individuals engaged in strength training benefit from 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, distributed evenly across meals. Carbohydrates play a different but equally essential role. Carbohydrates are the body's primary source of glycogen, the stored form of glucose in muscles and liver. High-intensity lifting, especially in the 65–85% 1 RM range, relies heavily on glycogen for fuel. Depleted glycogen not only reduces performance, but also elevates cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Elevated cortisol over time suppresses testosterone and growth hormone, undermining the very hormonal optimization we seek. In addition, carbohydrate intake stimulates insulin release, which is often misunderstood. While chronically elevated insulin from poor diet is problematic, acute insulin spikes after training are beneficial because insulin is anabolic. It facilitates the uptake of amino acids and glucose into muscle cells, accelerating repair and growth. For most individuals, consuming complex carbohydrates before and after training, such as oats, rice, potatoes, or fruit, supports both performance and hormonal balance. Dietary fats are critical for hormone synthesis. Testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol are all steroid hormones, meaning they are derived from cholesterol. Very low-fat diets, particularly those below 15–20% of total calories, can significantly reduce testosterone production. Saturated fats, often vilified, play a role here, though balance is important. Monounsaturated fats found in foods like olive oil and avocados and omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish, flax, or chia also support hormone regulation and reduce inflammation. For strength and hormone optimization, ensuring that 25–35% of daily calories come from fat with a balance of types appears optimal. Now, let's connect nutrition more directly to the hormonal system. Testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1, are highly sensitive to nutritional status. Chronic caloric restriction lowers testosterone and IGF-1, while adequate energy intake sustains them. On the other hand, excessive caloric surplus with poor nutrient quality elevates body fat, which can increase aromatase activity, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. This creates a hormonal imbalance unfavorable for strength. Thus, energy balance is crucial. Eating enough to fuel performance and recovery, but not so much that excess body fat disrupts hormonal regulation. For most strength-focused individuals, this means maintaining a slight caloric surplus during muscle-building phases and a slight deficit during fat loss phases, while ensuring macronutrient quality remains high. Micronutrients also deserve attention. Zinc and magnesium, for example, are cofactors in testosterone production. Vitamin D acts more like a hormone than a vitamin and is essential for muscle function and hormone regulation. Deficiencies in these micronutrients are surprisingly common and directly impair strength and endocrine function. A blood test is the most reliable way to assess status, but general dietary practices include ensuring adequate intake of zinc from meat, seeds, or shellfish, magnesium from leafy greens, nuts, or legumes, and vitamin D from sunlight or supplementation when necessary. Hydration is another overlooked but critical factor. Even mild dehydration, as little as 2% body weight loss from fluid, impairs strength, reduces testosterone, and elevates cortisol. Water is the medium for nearly all cellular processes, including hormone transport and enzymatic reactions. The simple act of maintaining hydration throughout the day is an accessible but powerful tool for performance and hormonal health. The timing of nutrition can also support hormonal optimization. While total daily intake is most important, consuming protein and carbohydrates within 1–2 hours post-training appears to maximize muscle protein synthesis and glycogen replenishment. This anabolic window is not as narrow as once believed, but it still represents a period where the body is particularly primed to absorb and utilize nutrients. A post-workout meal with 25–40 grams of protein and 50–100 grams of carbohydrates is a practical target for most individuals. Beyond macronutrients and timing, we can consider broader dietary patterns. Diets excessively high in processed foods, sugars, and industrial seed oils tend to elevate inflammation and disrupt hormone signaling. By contrast, whole food-based diets, rich in lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, and abundant micronutrients create an internal environment that supports anabolic hormones and efficient recovery. There are also specific nutritional protocols that interact with training. For example, intermittent fasting has gained popularity, and while it can be effective for fat loss, it may reduce testosterone and impair performance if not carefully managed. Similarly, ketogenic diets, which are very low in carbohydrates, can support fat metabolism, but may limit glycogen-dependent strength performance if applied long. The best approach depends on the individual's goals, genetics, and lifestyle, but the unifying principle is that sufficient energy and nutrients must be available to support strength training demands. Practical protocols can be summarized as follows. Protocol 1. Daily nutrition targets protein. 1.6-2.2 g/kg body weight per day. Carbohydrates, 3.6 g/kg body weight. Adjusted for training volume. Fats, 25-35% of total calories with a mix of saturated, monounsaturated sources. Protocol 2. Micronutrients ensure adequate zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. Consider supplementation if dietary intake or sunlight exposure is insufficient. Consume a wide variety of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds to cover other micronutrient needs. Protocol 3. Hydration, aim for 2-3 liters of water per day, more if training in hot conditions or sweating heavily. Monitor hydration through urine color. Pale yellow is a practical indicator of adequate hydration. Protocol 4. Timing pre-training. A balanced meal 2-3 hours before, including protein and carbohydrates. Post-training, 25-40 g protein plus 50-100 g carbohydrates within 1-2 hours. Spread protein intake evenly across 3-5 meals to maximize muscle protein synthesis. Nutrition also intersects with psychology. Eating in a structured way, consistent meal timing, deliberate food choices supports adherence and reduces decision fatigue. This consistency reinforces the neurochemical systems of dopamine, providing small rewards through routine and predictability. In other words, nutrition protocols that are sustainable and repeatable are more effective than overly rigid or extreme approaches. To summarize, nutrition is the fifth pillar because it provides the building blocks for adaptation and regulates the hormonal systems that underlie strength. Protein supports muscle repair. Carbohydrates fuel performance and control cortisol. Fats sustain hormone production, and micronutrients fine-tune the process. Hydration and timing amplify the benefits. By aligning nutrition with training demands, we transform exercise from a stressor into a catalyst for strength and hormonal optimization. The role of sleep and circadian rhythms in strength gains and hormonal balance. When people think about strength training, they often imagine the gym itself. The weights lifted, the sets completed, the sweat, and yet one of the most powerful determinants of strength and hormone optimization happens not in the gym, but in the hours we spend asleep. Sleep is not simply a passive state. It is an active biological process that restores the nervous system, repairs muscle tissue, and regulates hormonal output. Without high-quality sleep, the protocols we apply in training and nutrition cannot fully take effect. Let's begin with the relationship between sleep and anabolic hormones. Testosterone follows a circadian rhythm, peaking in the early morning hours. Growth hormone is released in pulses throughout the day, but its largest pulse occurs in the first phase of deep, slow-wave sleep. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, also follows a circadian pattern, rising in the early morning to promote alertness and falling at night to allow sleep. These rhythms are tightly regulated by the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock that synchronizes our physiology with the light-dark cycle. When sleep is shortened, fragmented, or misaligned with natural circadian rhythms, these hormonal patterns become disrupted. Multiple studies show that even 1 week of restricted sleep, 5 hours per night, can reduce testosterone in men by 10-15%. Growth hormone secretion also declines with insufficient slow-wave sleep, impairing muscle repair and recovery. At the same time, cortisol levels become elevated, leading to a catabolic state that breaks down tissue rather than building it. In practical terms, this means that training adaptations stall, motivation declines, and recovery is incomplete. Sleep is also critical for the nervous system. During deep sleep, the brain undergoes processes of synaptic pruning and consolidation. This is when motor learning, the neurological encoding of movement patterns practiced in training, becomes permanent. For example, practicing squats during the day activates neural circuits, but those circuits are reinforced and stabilized during sleep. Without this consolidation, skill acquisition and coordination plateau, limiting strength expression. Circadian alignment is another layer. The body is designed to function in sync with the 24-hour light-dark cycle. Exposure to natural light in the morning sets the circadian clock, anchoring hormonal rhythms. Conversely, exposure to artificial light late at night, particularly blue light from screens, suppresses melatonin, delays sleep onset, and shifts circadian timing. This misalignment has downstream effects on testosterone, growth hormone, and cortisol. For individuals who train regularly, these disruptions can be the difference between consistent progress and frustrating stagnation. Let's also consider sleep architecture. The stages of deep, slow-wave sleep, which dominates the first half of the night, is when most growth hormone release occurs and when physical repair processes are prioritized. REM sleep, which becomes more prominent in the second half of the night, is when cognitive and emotional integration occur. Both are necessary. Shortening sleep not only reduces total sleep time, but disproportionately reduces REM, impairing motivation, emotional regulation, and the dopamine systems that underlie drive to train. What practical tools can we apply to support sleep and circadian alignment? Protocol 1. Light exposure. View natural sunlight within the first hour of waking. This anchors the circadian clock, increases morning cortisol in a healthy pattern, and enhances alertness. In the evening, dim artificial lights and minimize blue light exposure from screens 1-2 hours before bed. If screen use is unavoidable, use warm light filters or blue light blocking glasses. Keep the bedroom dark at night to allow melatonin release and maintain circadian integrity. Protocol 2. Sleep duration and consistency. Aim for 7-9 hours of sleep per night, with consistent sleep and wake times. Consistency strengthens circadian rhythms and improves sleep quality. Avoid large swings in sleep timing between weekdays and weekends, as this creates social jet lag that disrupts hormonal rhythms. Protocol 3. Temperature and environment. Keep the sleeping environment cool. Ideally 65-68 degrees F, 18-20 degrees C. A drop in core body temperature is a natural signal for sleep onset. Use breathable bedding and ensure adequate ventilation in the room. Minimize noise. If unavoidable, consider white noise machines or earplugs. Protocol 4. Pre-sleep routine. Engage in calming activities before bed. Reading, light stretching, or slow breathing exercises. Avoid intense exercise, large meals, or caffeine in the 4-6 hours before sleep, as these can delay sleep onset and fragment sleep cycles. If needed, use relaxation protocols such as non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, or yoga nidra during the day to supplement recovery, especially when nighttime sleep is insufficient. Protocol 5. Nutrition and sleep-adequate carbohydrate intake support serotonin and melatonin synthesis, aiding sleep onset. Magnesium-rich foods, such as leafy greens and nuts, can support relaxation and improve sleep quality. Limit alcohol, which disrupts REM sleep, and avoid excessive fluid intake before bed to reduce nighttime awakening. There is also an interesting bidirectional relationship between sleep and exercise. While sleep enhances recovery from exercise, exercise itself improves sleep quality. Resistance training performed regularly has been shown to deepen slow-wave sleep and reduce sleep latency. However, training very late in the evening, especially with high intensity, can delay melatonin onset and impair sleep. The practical takeaway is to finish intense sessions at least 2-3 hours before bedtime. Psychologically, sleep supports motivation through its effects on dopamine pathways. Chronic sleep deprivation lowers dopamine receptor sensitivity, which reduces the subjective drive to train. This creates a feedback loop. Poor sleep reduces motivation, leading to skipped sessions, which further weakens circadian and hormonal rhythms. Prioritizing sleep breaks this cycle, reinforcing both physiological and psychological readiness for training. For athletes and individuals seeking to maximize strength and hormonal health, monitoring sleep is becoming more common. Wearable devices that track sleep duration and stages provide useful, though imperfect, data. The key is not to obsess over metrics, but to use them as feedback. If performance stalls, recovery feels incomplete, or mood declines, sleep should be one of the first factors evaluated. To summarize, sleep and circadian rhythms are the sixth pillar because they regulate the hormonal cycles of testosterone, growth hormone, and cortisol, while also consolidating motor learning and nervous system recovery. Training signals adaptation, but sleep is when that adaptation is encoded and expressed. By aligning with natural circadian rhythms, protecting sleep architecture, and applying practical tools, we ensure that the full benefits of training and nutrition are realized. Sleep is not a passive absence of wakefulness. It is an active, powerful contributor to strength and hormonal optimization. Nutrition as a lever for strength and hormonal optimization. When discussing strength training, it is easy to think primarily in terms of sets, repetitions, and exercises. But the fuel that drives adaptation is nutrition. Food provides not only energy, but also the molecular building blocks for muscle tissue, the cofactors for enzymatic reactions, and the raw materials for hormone synthesis. The relationship between nutrition, strength, and hormone optimization is multifaceted, and understanding it allows us to design systems that support both performance and long-term health. Let us begin with macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Each plays a distinct and necessary role. Protein is the most obvious starting point because it provides the amino acids required for muscle protein synthesis. The essential amino acids, particularly leucine, act as signals that stimulate the mTOR pathway, which drives the creation of new muscle proteins. Research indicates that a daily intake of 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight maximizes muscle protein synthesis in strength-trained individuals. Spreading this intake evenly across meals, approximately 20-40 grams per meal, optimizes the anabolic response. Carbohydrates are equally important, though often misunderstood. Carbohydrates replenish glycogen stores in muscle, which are the primary fuel for high-intensity resistance training. Depleted glycogen not only reduces performance, but also increases cortisol, the stress hormone that can impair recovery when chronically elevated. Post-exercise carbohydrate intake blunts cortisol and accelerates recovery. Moreover, insulin, stimulated by carbohydrate ingestion, has a permissive effect on muscle protein synthesis, ensuring that amino acids are effectively taken up by muscle tissue. Fats, particularly essential fatty acids, play a central role in hormone synthesis. Cholesterol is the precursor to testosterone, cortisol, and other steroid hormones. Diets extremely low in fat, less than 15% of total calories, have been shown to reduce testosterone levels. Healthy fats from sources such as olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, and fatty fish provide not only structural components for cell membranes, but also influence inflammatory balance, which indirectly impacts recovery and performance. Omega-3 fatty acids, for example, reduce exercise, induced muscle soreness, and support cardiovascular health, both of which enhance training capacity. Micronutrients deserve equal attention. Zinc and magnesium are critical for testosterone production and enzymatic activity in muscle cells. Vitamin D acts as a steroid hormone itself, influencing muscle strength and testosterone levels, while also supporting immune function. Deficiency in these nutrients, which is common in many populations, undermines both strength gains and hormonal health. Practical tools include regular monitoring through blood work and, if necessary, supplementation at clinically effective doses. Timing of nutrition also matters. While total daily intake is the primary determinant of adaptation, strategic timing enhances results. Consuming protein and carbohydrates within 2 hours after training accelerates recovery, replenishes glycogen, and maximizes the anabolic window. This does not mean that missing a post-workout shake ruins progress. The total intake across the day is most important. But aligning nutrient intake with the body's heightened sensitivity after exercise leverages biology for faster adaptation. Hydration is another often overlooked factor. Even mild dehydration of 2% body weight reduces strength and increases cortisol. Water is required for nearly every metabolic reaction, including protein synthesis and energy production. Electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, maintain fluid balance, nerve conduction, and muscle contraction. For those training intensely, particularly in hot environments, electrolyte replenishment becomes essential. The interplay between nutrition and circadian rhythms adds another layer. Eating large meals late at night can impair sleep quality, particularly REM sleep, which then disrupts hormonal rhythms. Conversely, aligning larger meals earlier in the day with periods of higher insulin sensitivity improves nutrient utilization and supports circadian health. A practical approach is to consume the bulk of calories in the first 2/3 of the day and taper food intake as evening progresses, while still ensuring adequate protein before bed to support overnight recovery. Special consideration should also be given to caloric balance. To gain strength and muscle, a modest caloric surplus is generally required. Research shows that a surplus of 200 and 300 calories per day is sufficient for most individuals, minimizing fat gain while supporting muscle growth. For those seeking to optimize hormones, chronic caloric restriction is problematic. Low energy availability reduces testosterone, disrupts thyroid function, and elevates cortisol. Conversely, chronic overfeeding and excess fat accumulation increase aromatase activity, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen, leading to hormonal imbalance. Balance is key. Practical protocols for nutrition can be summarized as follows. Protocol 1. Protein aim for 1.6 to 2.2 kg body weight daily. Distribute evenly across 3-5 meals. Prioritize complete protein sources, lean meats, eggs, dairy, fish, or plant combinations like legumes with grains. Protocol 2. Carbohydrates support training with 3-6 kg body weight, depending on volume and intensity. Emphasize complex sources, whole grains, fruits, vegetables. Time intake around training to support performance and recovery. Protocol 3. Fats. Keep dietary fats at 20-30% of total calories. Include sources rich in omega-3s and monounsaturated fats. Avoid excessive trans fats and highly processed oils. Protocol 4. Micronutrients. Ensure adequate zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. Use blood testing to individualize supplementation. Prioritize whole food sources whenever possible. Protocol 5. Hydration. Drink water consistently throughout the day. Use electrolyte supplementation when training intensely or sweating heavily. Monitor urine color as a simple feedback tool. Pale yellow indicates adequate hydration. Protocol 6. Meal timing and circadian alignment. Align larger meals earlier in the day. Consume protein-rich snacks in the evening if needed to support overnight recovery. Avoid heavy, late-night meals that disrupt sleep. It is important to emphasize that nutrition is not about rigid rules, but about systems. Systems create sustainability. For example, creating a routine of preparing protein-rich meals ahead of time reduces decision fatigue and ensures compliance. Tracking progress through performance, recovery, and periodic body composition assessments provides feedback. Adjustments can then be made gradually, without extreme shifts. Finally, let's consider the psychological layer. Nutrition is not only biochemical but behavioral. Consistency is the true determinant of success. This means designing an eating pattern that aligns with lifestyle, preferences, and cultural context. Diets that are overly restrictive tend to fail because they ignore these realities. Instead, frameworks grounded in whole, minimally processed foods, sufficient protein, balanced macronutrients, and mindful timing offer both flexibility and effectiveness. To summarize, nutrition is the 7th pillar because it provides the raw materials for muscle growth, the energy for training, and the substrates for hormone synthesis. It also regulates recovery, circadian alignment, and psychological adherence. Training is the stimulus, but nutrition is the building block. Together, they create the foundation for sustainable strength and hormonal health. Stress management and its impact on strength and hormonal health. When we think about training, we often focus on the physical stress we deliberately impose through exercise. But our bodies do not differentiate sharply between the stress of lifting weights and the stress of a demanding job, financial worries, or inadequate recovery. All forms of stress converge on the same biological pathways, particularly the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, HPA. axis, which governs the release of cortisol. Understanding how stress shapes strength gains and hormonal optimization is essential because the outcomes of training are determined not only by what happens in the gym, but also by the context of the broader stress landscape of life. Let us begin with cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol follows a natural circadian rhythm, peaking in the early morning to promote wakefulness and gradually declining throughout the day. In acute bursts, such as during intense exercise, cortisol is beneficial. It mobilizes glucose for energy, sharpens focus, and primes the body for action. However, when cortisol remains chronically elevated due to persistent stress, inadequate recovery, or poor sleep, it becomes catabolic. Chronic cortisol reduces testosterone, impairs growth hormone secretion, and promotes muscle breakdown rather than muscle building. The interaction between cortisol and testosterone is particularly important. These hormones exist in a dynamic balance. Testosterone is anabolic, promoting tissue growth and repair. Cortisol in excess is catabolic, breaking down tissue to provide energy. When cortisol levels remain high, testosterone signaling is blunted and training adaptations stall. This is why individuals under chronic stress often experience plateaus in strength, reduced motivation, and even increased fat storage around the midsection, which is a hallmark of cortisol dysregulation. Stress also impacts the nervous system. Training adaptations depend on the nervous system's ability to recover and re-engage. Chronic stress places the autonomic nervous system into a sympathetic dominant state, via fight or flight mode. While short bursts of sympathetic activation are necessary for performance, staying locked in this state prevents the parasympathetic arrest and digestive processes that repair muscle, restore glycogen, and rebalance hormones. Without adequate parasympathetic activation, the system cannot respond. From a psychological perspective, stress undermines motivation and adherence. Stress consumes cognitive resources and willpower. It alters dopamine pathways, reducing the sense of reward from training and making it more difficult to maintain consistency. This is why stress management is not a luxury. It is a critical part of the protocol for strength and hormonal health. What practical tools can be applied to regulate stress? Protocol 1. Breathing and physiological regulation. Slow, deliberate breathing patterns directly influence the autonomic nervous system. One simple protocol is the physiological sigh. 2 inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This pattern reduces carbon dioxide levels and rapidly decreases sympathetic activation. Daily practice of slow breathing, for example, 5 minutes of 4-second inhales and 6-second exhales, increases parasympathetic tone, supporting recovery and hormonal balance. Protocol 2. Non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, and meditation NSDR protocols, such as Yoga Nidra, place the nervous system into a deeply restorative state, reducing cortisol and improving dopamine receptor sensitivity. Even short sessions of mindfulness meditation, 10 minutes daily, have been shown to reduce baseline cortisol levels and improve emotional regulation. Protocol 3. Physical activity as stress management. While strength training itself is a stressor, low-intensity activities, such as walking, cycling, or swimming, promote parasympathetic activity when performed at conversational pace. Exposure to nature, known as a green exercise, further reduces cortisol and supports mood regulation. Protocol 4. Social connection. Strong social bonds buffer the physiological impact of stress. Oxytocin released during positive social interactions counteracts cortisol and supports recovery. Practical strategies include training with a partner, engaging in community activities, or maintaining consistent social contact outside of work and training. Protocol 5. Cold and heat exposure. Cold exposure, such as cold showers or ice baths, creates a brief controlled stressor that increases dopamine and norepinephrine, enhancing resilience. Heat exposure, particularly through sauna use, increases growth hormone, improves cardiovascular function, and reduces cortisol levels over time. Protocol 6. Cognitive reframing. The way we perceive stress shapes its biological impact. Viewing stressors as challenges rather than threats changes the hormonal response, increasing adrenaline without chronically elevating cortisol. Journaling, Reframing thoughts or structured problem-solving practices can shift perception and reduce the physiological burden of stress. Importantly, stress management is not about eliminating stress altogether. Stress is necessary for adaptation. The very act of training is a form of controlled stress. What matters is the balance between stress and recovery. The concept of Lodi describes the cumulative wear and tear on the body from repeated stress without adequate recovery. When allostatic load becomes excessive, systems break down. When managed properly, stress becomes a driver of resilience and adaptation. There is also a direct link between stress and sleep, which we discussed previously. Elevated cortisol in the evening delays sleep onset and reduces slow-wave and REM sleep. This creates a vicious cycle. Stress disrupts sleep. Poor sleep increases stress sensitivity, and both undermine strength and hormonal balance. By incorporating stress regulation protocols during the day, we improve the ability to transition into restorative sleep at night. From a practical standpoint, it is useful to think of stress management as part of the training plan. Just as sets and repetitions are scheduled, so too should recovery practices be scheduled. A daily 10-minute breathing session, a weekly sauna session, or a 20-minute walk in nature should be viewed not as extras, but as integral parts of the system. To summarize, stress management is the 8th pillar because cortisol, the primary stress hormone, directly influences testosterone, growth hormone, nervous system recovery, and motivation. Chronic stress undermines every other adaptation, while effective stress regulation practices enhance them. By actively engaging in tools that restore balance to the nervous system and reframe psychological perception, we transform stress from a destructive force into a constructive driver of resilience. The mind-muscle connection, neural drive, and mental focus in training. When we consider strength training, we often emphasize the external variables, how much weight is lifted, how many repetitions are performed, or what program is, but the internal variables, the degree of focus, the quality of neural drive, and the connection between brain and muscle are equally important. The nervous system is the true origin of strength. Muscles do not contract on their own. They contract because motor neurons signal them to do so. Optimizing this brain-to-muscle pathway, often referred to as the mind-muscle connection, is essential for both strength gains and hormonal optimization. Let's begin with neural drive. Neural drive refers to the efficiency and intensity with which the brain recruits motor units, the bundles of muscle fibers activated by a single motor neuron. Strength is not simply about muscle size. It is also about the nervous system's ability to recruit more motor units more quickly and in a more synchronized fashion. Studies show that the early stages of strength gains in training are predominantly neural. Before significant muscle growth occurs, the nervous system learns how to activate muscles more effectively. This explains why beginners often experience rapid strength improvements without much change in muscle size. The mind-muscle connection plays a role here. Research indicates that focusing attention internally on the target muscle, for example, consciously thinking about contracting the chest during a bench press, increases muscle activation compared to focusing externally on simply moving the body. This does not mean that external focus is useless. In fact, external focus may be superior for power and athletic performance. But for strength and hypertrophy, cultivating the ability to intentionally engage and feel, the muscle can enhance recruitment and adaptation. From a hormonal perspective, mental focus during training increases the release of catecholamines such as dopamine and norepinephrine. These neurochemicals heighten attention, motivation, and drive. Dopamine in particular plays a dual role. It not only enhances effort during the session, but also reinforces the behavior afterward, making it more likely that training becomes a consistent habit. Over time, this creates a positive feedback loop where focus enhances performance, performance enhances dopamine, and dopamine enhances motivation. The prefrontal cortex, which governs attention and intentional control, interacts with motor regions of the brain to direct movement. When we practice training with deep focus, eliminating distractions, reducing multitasking, and maintaining awareness of form, these brain regions strengthen their communication. This is a form of neuroplasticity. Over weeks and months, the nervous system literally becomes better wired for strength. Practical protocols can help cultivate this focus. Protocol 1, eliminate distractions, keep training sessions free of unnecessary interruptions. Place the phone on airplane mode or in a locker. Music can be useful, but avoid constant checking or playlist changes. The goal is immersion in the training process. Protocol 2, set intentional focus. Before each set before lifting, take a brief pause. 10-15 seconds to visualize the movement and the target muscles. Research shows that even short bouts of motor imagery increase motor unit recruitment during subsequent performance. Protocol 3, internal versus external cues for hypertrophy-oriented sets. Use internal cues such as or contract the glutes. For strength or performance-oriented lifts, use external cues such as a drive the floor away or a push the bar explosively. Alternating between these cueing strategies balances muscle activation with movement efficiency. Protocol 4, breathing and neural readiness. Breathing influences focus and neural drive. Taking 1 or 2 deep, deliberate breaths before a lift primes the nervous system. The Valsalva maneuver, holding breath during the sticking point of a heavy lift, increases intra-abdominal pressure and neural output, though it must be used cautiously in individuals with cardiovascular concern. Protocol 5, visualization and motor imagery. Athletes have long used visualization to enhance performance. Neuroscience confirms that imagining a movement activates many of the same neural circuits as performance. Spending 2-3 minutes visualizing lifts before training sessions can enhance actual strength performance by improving motor unit synchronization. Beyond performance in the gym, the mind-muscle connection influences recovery. Focused training creates stronger neuromuscular pathways, which makes movement more efficient and reduces unnecessary strain on joints and connective tissue. This efficiency reduces injury risk and improves the long-term sustainability of training. Mental focus also influences hormonal rhythms indirectly by modulating stress perception. When training is approached as a mindful practice with deliberate presence rather than rushed completion, cortisol spikes are better regulated and the balance between cortisol and testosterone is preserved. In contrast, training in a distracted state, rushing through sets while checking notifications, creates fragmented attention, lower quality neural drive, and a less favorable hormonal response. It is worth noting that mental fatigue outside the gym also impairs neural drive. Research shows that engaging in prolonged cognitively demanding tasks, such as extended computer work, reduces subsequent strength performance. The mechanism appears to involve reduced dopamine and increased perception of effort. The practical solution is to manage mental load and, where possible, schedule heavy training sessions at times when the mind is relatively fresh. The larger point is this: strength is as much a neural adaptation as a muscular. The more deliberately we engage the nervous system, the more robust those adaptations become. The mind-muscle connection, mental focus, and neural drive are not abstract concepts. They are measurable, trainable variables that determine the efficiency of strength development. To summarize, the 9th pillar emphasizes that the brain is the command center of strength. Neural drive, attention, and the mind-muscle connection govern how effectively we recruit muscle fibers, how powerfully we adapt, and how consistently we sustain motivation. By cultivating focus, eliminating distractions, and using visualization and intentional cueing, we transform training from a purely physical act into a deeply integrated neurophysiological process. Long-term systems, consistency, and sustainable protocols, the last and perhaps most important dimension of strength and hormonal optimization, is not found in any single training session, diet choice, or recovery technique. It is found in the systems we build over time. Adaptation in the body is cumulative. Neuroplasticity, muscle growth, hormonal regulation, all are the results of repeated exposures over weeks, months, and years. Strength is not a short-term pursuit. Hormonal optimization is not achieved with a single intervention. Both require consistency within systems that are sustainable across the long arc of life. Let us begin with the principle of sustainability. Many individuals are drawn to extreme protocols, maximal diets, punishing training regimens, or rigid recovery rules. These may produce rapid results in the short term, but they rarely endure. The nervous system and endocrine system thrive on patterns that are challenging enough to stimulate adaptation, but not so extreme that they induce burnout. Sustainability requires moderation in intensity, variety in stimulus, and alignment with lifestyle. Consistency is another cornerstone. From a biological perspective, the body craves rhythm. Just as circadian rhythms anchor sleep and hormonal cycles, consistent training and nutritional rhythms anchor adaptation. Training at similar times each day, eating meals at regular intervals, and maintaining steady sleep-wake schedules all reinforce neuroendocrine stability. Research shows that individuals who train consistently, even if sessions are moderate in intensity, achieve greater long-term strength and hormonal health than those who oscillate between periods of intensity and inactivity. Systems thinking brings this together. A system is a set of practices that are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. For example, a system might look like this: morning light exposure to set circadian rhythm, a midday strength session with progressive overload, post-training nutrition, emphasizing protein and carbohydrates, evening stress regulation through breathing practices and consistent sleep routine. Each element reinforces the others. The system becomes more powerful than any single protocol in isolation. Feedback loops are a critical part of systems. The body provides signals: performance in training, quality of sleep, mood, libido, and recovery. Paying attention to these signals allows for adjustments. If sleep quality declines, perhaps training intensity is too high or nutrition is insufficient. If motivation wanes, perhaps stress is accumulating. By creating a system that includes regular reflection, weekly or monthly check-ins, we ensure that protocols remain adaptive rather than rigid. One way to frame this is through the concept of a minimum effective. The minimum effective dose is the smallest stimulus that produces the desired adaptation. By applying just enough stress to provoke growth, while maintaining consistency over time, we avoid unnecessary risk and maximize sustainability. This is particularly important for hormonal health. The endocrine system is sensitive to extremes. Overtraining, undereating, or chronic sleep deprivation all disrupt hormonal balance. The minimum effective dose keeps the system in balance while still driving progress. Technology can assist in maintaining systems. Wearables that track heart rate variability, HRV, sleep, and training load provide useful feedback. HRV, for example, is a marker of autonomic nervous system balance. Low HRV indicates sympathetic dominance and insufficient recovery, while high HRV reflects parasympathetic balance and readiness. While no device is perfect, these tools can guide adjustments within the system, keeping training and recovery aligned with the body's signal. Motivation over the long term is supported by identity. Rather than framing strength training as a temporary project, it becomes part of who we are. Research on behavior change shows that identity-based habits are more sustainable than outcome-based goals. Saying, "I am the kind of person who trains consistently," is more powerful than saying, "I want to lift a certain weight." This identity-based approach aligns behavior with self-concept, creating intrinsic motivation that endures when external motivation fades. Social structures also reinforce systems. Training partners, communities, or even digital accountability groups provide external reinforcement. The neurochemistry of social connection, oxytocin and dopamine, supports consistency and resilience. By embedding training and recovery practices within a social framework, we increase adherence and enjoyment. Finally, let us consider the long-term arc. Hormonal health and strength are not static. They evolve across the lifespan. In youth, the emphasis may be on maximizing performance. In midlife, the emphasis shifts toward maintaining vitality and counteracting gradual hormonal decline. In later years, the emphasis becomes preserving function, mobility, and independence. Systems should adapt accordingly. What remains constant is the principle of consistent, sustainable protocols that respect both the demands of the present and the trajectory of the future. To summarize, the 10th pillar emphasizes that strength and hormonal optimization are not built in days or weeks, but across years of consistent practice. Sustainability, consistency, Systems, thinking, and feedback loops create a framework that inverts. The protocols we apply matter less than the systems that support them. Training becomes not just an activity, but a way of living, one that honors the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the long-term arc of human performance. We have now walked through the 10 essential pillars of strength, gains, and hormone optimization. Each pillar represents not just an isolated tactic, but part of an integrated system, a system that aligns the nervous system, the muscular system, and the endocrine system to drive adaptation, resilience, and long-term health. We began with the principle of progressive overload, the foundation of all strength gains. Without it, the body has no reason to adapt. We then considered compound lifts and full-body movements, which recruit large muscle groups and stimulate powerful hormonal responses. We looked at training variables, volume, intensity, rest intervals as levers we can adjust to fine-tune progress. We explored the role of recovery, emphasizing that adaptation does not occur during training, but during rest. We discussed the importance of periodization, cycling training intensity over time to prevent burnout and maximize growth. From there, we turned to sleep and circadian rhythms, the hidden drivers of hormonal balance and nervous system consolidation. We examined nutrition as the molecular foundation of adaptation, providing the building blocks and energy for growth. We explored stress management, recognizing that cortisol can either support or undermine progress depending on how it is regulated. We moved into the mind-muscle connection and neural drive, highlighting the role of focus and intentionality in shaping adaptation. And finally, we arrived at systems and sustainability, the recognition that strength and hormonal health are not short-term projects, but lifelong pursuits, guided by consistent, repeatable practices. If there is a single theme across all these pillars, it is this: strength and hormonal optimization arise from the interaction of biology and behavior, science and consistency, protocols and systems. The nervous system adapts to signals, the endocrine system responds to stress and recovery, and the muscular system follows the commands it receives. By aligning these systems through deliberate practice, we create not only physical strength, but also mental resilience and long-term vitality. This process does not require perfection, it requires repetition. Small, consistent actions applied over time rewire the nervous system, reshape the body, and recalibrate hormonal balance. Missing a workout, a night of poor sleep, or a stressful day does not undo progress. What matters is returning to the system, anchoring to the pillars we've outlined, and allowing time and consistency to do their work. As you move forward, remember that these tools are not abstract. They are protocols that can be implemented daily. A set of squats with progressive overload, a consistent bedtime routine, a walk in the morning light, a breathing practice after work, a deliberate focus on contracting the target muscle during training. Each protocol is a small lever. Together, they form a system that can transform strength, hormones, and long-term performance. In the end, this is not only about lifting heavier weights or optimizing hormone levels, it is about building a system that supports the quality of your life, your energy, your resilience, your ability to engage with challenges and recover from. Strength training becomes not just a practice of the body, but a practice of the mind and the nervous system, a way of shaping biology through behavior. And so the invitation is clear. Apply these principles, experiment with these protocols, respect the feedback of your body, and commit to the long-term process. The results will come, not in dramatic bursts, but in steady, reliable adaptations that accumulate over time. Strength and hormonal balance are built day by day through systems that honor both science and sustainability.